And then also, I got to repeat this. It's the fact that he drops his hands consistently after finishing or during combinations. If I'm Canelo Alvarez and I see that, that's the first thing I'm looking for when it's round 10, 11, 12, when I see an opening. That's what happened with Kovalev. That's what happened with Caleb Plant.
Welcome back to the RBR Recap, a special edition precap episode as we count down to Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol. I am Alex Burgos, joined as always by my co-host, Gabe Rivas. Gabe, with the beautiful background, the lemon tree, the sun. I'm jealous. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. This is one of the benefits of working mostly from home. Just got back from New York, and now I can take a few days to recover in this beautiful California weather.
Yeah, look at that, man. Two young Salvadorians working from home, successful. Check.
Right? It's the American dream. And if you want a
dream.
right, and if you want an orange juice or a lemon juice, you go right into our backyards.
Or some cola champagne.
There you go. Our future sponsor, hopefully.
There you go, man. There you go. But yeah, let's jump into what we are already seeing with Canelo versus Bivol. We got the first fight week face-off. Obviously, there was a pre-fight press conference, about a month or so ago where they faced off, and we kind of saw the height differential, the size difference. But what, if anything, can we take from yesterday's face-off? Obviously, this isn't the type of fight where there's a bunch of animosity or just disrespect with the face-offs. We're not going to get any choking or spitting or anything like that. But I think there is something we can gather, at least from the size and maybe how this fight will play out stylistically. What are your thoughts on that, Gabe?
Canelo Alvarez is no stranger to being the shorter fighter in his fights, and this battle against Dmitry Bivol is no exception. If you just look at the numbers in terms of height and reach, Dmitry Bivol stands at 6 feet tall. Previous opponents for Canelo have been guys like Caleb Plant, who is 6'1", Callum Smith, 6'3", and Kovalev, who stands at 6 feet tall. Canelo Alvarez stands at 5'8". So he's had to deal with being the shorter fighter in most of his fights in his career. And in terms of reach, Bivol has a 72-inch reach, whereas Canelo has 70 and a half reach. So almost 2 inches in reach that he's giving up against Dmitry Bivol. Previous opponents of Canelo, like Caleb Plant, had a 74-inch reach, Kovalev 72 and a half, and Callum Smith 78-inch reach. So he's had to deal with these things in the past. But the most important thing is the style matchup. Someone like Dmitry Bivol, I would say, is a little bit less elusive than Caleb Plant, but perhaps a little bit stronger, a little bit more subtle in his footwork and his defense. In terms of his output, he's a little bit more like Kovalev and having more of an Eastern European style, but a little bit more straight up and down, jabs, right hands, and hooks that are kind of wide. So not, like you said, perhaps not too much to get from his face-off because there's not that much animosity. But if you highlight the reach and the height advantage for Dmitry Bivol, then you see the same story that Canelo has been dealing with for his past few fights.
Yeah, I agree that, the size tells a story because we know what it's going to be for Canelo come fight night. He's going to have to get on the inside, and there's going to have to be a lot of tactic on how he gets behind that jab of Bivol's and behind the right hook, gets past it. And Dmitry Bivol, like you mentioned, not maybe as athletic and fluid in his movement and boxing as Caleb Plant, but also more athletic and elusive than Sergey Kovalev. So kind of somewhere in between there, a style or game plan that he'll have to really perfect and implement to give himself the best chance to win will be working behind that jab, keeping Canelo at bay, and also keeping him away from his body, because we know Canelo likes to work that body and will obviously try to slow Bivol down. I don't think Bivol stands toe-to-toe with him. I thought Plant did things well in spots, but in the long term, in the long run, in that fight, he didn't sit down on his punches enough, didn't give Canelo anything to really worry about in the power department. And so that's maybe where Bivol can change the storyline in this fight. If he can find spots to sit down on his punches, and then get out of range where Canelo can't fire back, he may have success. And, we've seen Canelo struggle a little bit having to cut off the ring. So can Bivol do those things to extend the fight and give him a chance to win, maybe on the scorecards? Now, obviously, people are going to probably roll their eyes that I say that because he has to knock Canelo out to get a draw, is what a lot of people say, just because Canelo is Canelo. But look, if we're talking about just how we think the fight can go for him to win, not bad decisions or corruption or anything like that, I think that's one way. Not thinking I have to knock this guy out. Let me just do what I'm good at. And that's the basics. And I can't remember who called Bivol basic recently. I read it somewhere, but I agree with that. And it's not a knock on him. It's not something that's downplaying his ability, but in essence, he is a quote unquote basic boxer. I mean, he's straight up and down. He's going to work behind the jab. I think you mentioned, he's going to throw wide hooks, that Eastern European style, and he's got power. He can do some things that may bother Canelo early on, and it's just a matter of, can he extend that and have success throughout the later rounds and maybe try to force it to go to the scorecards and see if he can win a decision. I do think he'll come to win. We've never seen him in a fight of this magnitude, but at the same time, I think he's young enough. He's got the tools in the bag to be able to give Canelo some problems. Not a walkover like a lot of people may think.
Yeah, that's another element we got to look at, is that every time Canelo fights someone, it's that person's biggest fight to date. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest stage for that person to date. We saw it with Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, everyone he has faced ever since, really, I would say, fighting the likes of Triple G and entering into a new phase of his career. Everyone has had to step up into a bigger stage. And one element to keep in mind is, how will they do when all the lights are on them, all the attention is placed on them? When you do a fight week of that magnitude, you start the week on Tuesday with the grand arrivals. You do press conferences Wednesday, maybe some stuff on Thursday, Friday weigh-in. It's a whole week. Is Dmitry Bivol prepared for that? How much experience does he have doing that? And obviously, he doesn't have that much experience being the B-side against the biggest star in boxing while doing that. So that's one thing you got to factor in, aside from the game plan within the fight. It's the psychological aspect and the wear and tear of just doing the fight week activities while making weight.
Definitely. Yeah. I remember one guy that kind of mentioned that the wear and tear of the media stuff was Jarrett Hurd when he fought Julian Williams. Where he was on like radio show after radio show, TV show, print interviews. It's like, it was nonstop because he was, he was fighting at home, and he was just like, it kind of caught up to me where it's just like, I was doing so much, but something of this magnitude, for Bivol may not be natural. And also he was, even when he was fighting on HBO, he may have been headlining against legitimate names, Joe Smith, Sullivan Barrera. But then now he's kind of been on the downturn in terms of like the cards that he's been on and the guys that he's been fighting. And he's kind of fallen out of that spotlight. And he hasn't been the headliner, and he hasn't been on these bigger shows. It's kind of been like in obscurity, fighting in other countries and at odd times here in the States. So this is kind of a return for him to the spotlight, obviously the biggest spotlight and the biggest stage for anyone, because Canelo is the cash cow, the biggest moneymaker in boxing. And so to fight him, you're winning the lottery in essence. But, I think he seems like a pretty stoic guy. When you talk to him, he's very just matter of fact, and doesn't seem like he'd get rattled from any of this. But again, that's just trying to read into, the type of person that he is based off of his interviews and things like that. But I think he will come prepared and at least throw more punches than Avni Yildirim. Also, another aspect we wanted to touch on are the betting odds. Now on fight week, things are getting wider in favor of Canelo Alvarez. It's on Wednesday, and Canelo is now a minus 540 betting favorite on the money line. Bivol is a plus 395, and that number keeps on going up in favor of Canelo. And so it seems like the odds makers are really, pitting this as almost an insurmountable, impossible task for Bivol to win. So, Gabe, I want to ask you, what are maybe some of the keys to victory for Dmitry Bivol? How do you think he comes in and actually upsets the apple cart here and wins this fight?
I applaud you for your analysis of the betting odds. I could never understand it. I perhaps never will be able to understand how to do that. But in terms of keys to victory, I think there are three things that Dmitry Bivol needs to keep in mind if he wants to score an upset victory. I think the first thing is to commit to a consistent jab, but also vary the speed, the timing, the levels, jab to the head, jab to the chest, jab to the body, and also feint. Canelo is a counterpuncher by nature, and one of the biggest ways for a counterpuncher to start landing shots off the jab is to see a consistent jab with the same speed, not really varying the timing. So if Dmitry Bivol can keep changing the direction and where he's going to throw the jab and the speed, it'll be much harder for Canelo to find his timing and actually counter over the top of those jabs and come back with punches of his own. So I think it's very important to keep him guessing about how quick the jabs are, where they're going, and where they're going to land from Dmitry Bivol. Another thing is to not allow Canelo to set his feet for more than a few seconds. Don't be greedy. Land your jab, land your 1-2, land your 1-2 hook, and then move around. Dmitry Bivol is really good at nullifying offense by stepping to his right and keeping his left hand, his lead hand in front of him. That's especially effective when someone is coming in with strong right hands. You got to protect your other side with your right hand like this for a hook and left hands. But if you know that a right hand is coming and you're worried about that, one effective way to nullify that is to keep circling to your right. And Dmitry Bivol is really good at doing that, at evading an oncoming aggression from a fighter by stepping to his right. So keep doing that and don't allow Canelo to set his feet for more than a few seconds, because then he'll be able to land some combination punches. That's what happened consistently with Callum Smith. With Callum Smith, he was there to hit. And so what did Canelo do? He started landing on his arms. He started landing everywhere. And whether, you may believe it or not, even landing on your arms and not connecting to the body or to the head starts to wear you down. Just feeling combinations on your body will start to wear you down. And also, the more you stay still, the more Canelo is able to find those openings. And we saw that with Caleb Plant near the end of the fight, where Caleb was trying to do some sort of shoulder roll defense on the ropes, as he normally does, but Canelo was able to come around and land the left hook on the side of his head that hurt him and eventually led to the knockout. And that leads to, I think, another important key to victory, and that's to be careful with the counter right hands and the counter hooks when throwing punches. Bivol tends to drop his left hand when boxing, and he also tends to drop his right hand when throwing combinations. If I'm Canelo, I'm waiting for you to finish your combination to come with the right hand or a hook, because I know that the hand's not going to be there when you finish punching. And he has an Eastern European style, right? And typically, if you're fighting in an amateur fight, you're not that worried about a knockout, and you're looking to score points, and you can keep a kind of long rangier style. But in professional boxing, once you get close, all it takes is just one punch to hurt you. And so you see a lot of, especially Mexican fighters, using shorter punches, like Julio Cesar Chavez, who was the king of throwing short punches on the inside. So he needs to be careful with the counter rights and the counter hooks, and especially when Canelo is getting close on the inside and really able to nullify his rangier style. Who do you think wins the fight, Alex?
Canelo Alvarez wins this fight. I mean, I don't see that Bivol will. I do think Bivol will have spots where he's successful. But what gets me is, and even Caleb Plant, I thought had spots where he was being successful, but it's like that longevity. Can you maintain that? I mean, even if we look at the Kovalev fight, Kovalev was like, what, 1-2 points down at the time of stoppage, and that was an old Kovalev. So it's not like it can't be done. Like Bivol said at the beginning of when the fight was announced, Canelo's not superhuman. He's a man. Right. But when the pressure of having to do these things at this high level, when you have a guy that's coming at you like Canelo, who can vary his punches, has really good head movement, it just, that pressure gets to you as well. And I don't know that Bivol can keep that strategy up and really maintain it to go through the 12 rounds. Now, an under bet, under 10.5 rounds is plus money. So if you bet under 10.5 rounds for this fight, it's a plus 220, meaning if you put $100, you would win 220 if the fight was stopped before 10.5 rounds. So, I mean, that again shows that the odds makers are not betting that Canelo will be able to stop Bivol. Again, that's something maybe people like to take that risk, because we've seen Canelo in the last, majority of his fights. He's going to stalk, and then he's eventually going to get you out of there one way or another.
Well, what did Brian Kenny say in the live stream of the Kovalev fight? Fifth gear. We need to see Canelo go into fifth gear, and then boom, he landed. But so the question is, rounds 10, 11, 12, will Bivol be able to keep it up or keep up with Canelo once he decides, all right, I see an opening, I'm going for the knockout, I'm going to go into fifth gear. I think that's the point you're making. And then also two things that concern me, and just by looking at recent tape of Dmitry Bivol, the speed, how much different will be what's going to be the speed differential between Canelo and Dmitry Bivol? Canelo started at 154. If you go farther back in his career, he was smaller, but for all intents and purposes, become a champion at around 154. And he is able, I think, he was able to retain some of that speed because he was always training to be a quick fighter. If you look at old training videos of Eddie Reynoso and him, he's always doing quick, fast combinations. He's always a quicker fighter. Dmitry Bivol does not seem like he has, like he's that quick in terms with his hands. And then also, I got to repeat this. It's the fact that he drops his hands consistently after finishing or during combinations. If I'm Canelo Alvarez and I see that, that's the first thing I'm looking for when it's round 10, 11, 12, when I see an opening. That's what happened with Kovalev. That's what happened with Caleb Plant. So I think those are two things that are really interesting that are going to be in favor of Canelo Alvarez: the speed and the fact that Bivol consistently drops his hands. What we wish for as boxing fans doesn't always pan out, but if Canelo is able to beat Dmitry Bivol and he wants to stay at light heavyweight, it'd be really interesting to see him take the challenge of facing the winner of Beterbiev versus Joe Smith. I would say that Beterbiev probably wins that fight. Much more, I think, sound, technically powerful. I think he wins that fight. And so imagine at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, because I know he has that commitment with Triple G, a fight between Canelo Alvarez and Artur Beterbiev for the undisputed light heavyweight championship. That would be spectacular. As someone who likes to see undisputed champions and who likes to see fighters try to be great, especially this biggest star in boxer, continue wanting to push himself, that'd be awesome for boxing fans.
Yeah, and actually, I was speaking with Immortal Technique earlier today, and we actually touched on that because it's like, what would you want to see? Because obviously, you can't please everyone. Obviously, the reports coming out today, Canelo ducked Errol Spence, and he didn't want to fight Jamal Charlo also. It's like, imagine if he would have taken that deal. He fights Charlo and then Spence. Then people are criticizing him for ducking the bigger guys. Exactly, and fighting a smaller guy. It's like people are never happy. But so what we were saying is, imagine he stays at 175 and fights the winner of the Beterbiev Smith fight. I mean, that's incredible. You trying to unify, become undisputed at 175 against potentially Bivol and Beterbiev, two guys that are legitimate title holders, champions, especially Beterbiev, who beat Bosdick for the WBC strap a few years ago. So, I mean, that'll be something that I would rather see, even as opposed to him going back down. I know he's got the big money fight locked in if he wins this one to go back down to 68 and fight Triple G in September. But man, if we could skip that one and him just go to, trying to be undisputed at 175, if he does win this fight, I think that would be my top pick. Some really intriguing fights for him in and around that division.
And it's beautiful to see the biggest star in boxing keep trying to push himself. It's like Pacquiao going all the way up to welterweight and super welterweight, but it's also very similar to Oscar De La Hoya getting a WBO middleweight championship against Felix Sturm and then moving up to face or staying at that division to face Bernard Hopkins for the unified undisputed middleweight championship.
I will contend that De La Hoya lost that fight though.
I think that's that fight. You can.
But no, your point is made. Chasing greatness.
Chasing greatness, and I think a lot of people would agree that Felix Sturm was robbed in that fight.
Yeah. Thanks for checking out this special edition of the RBR Recap, a special precap for Canelo versus Bivol. We'll be back with some more coverage. And also, don't forget to enter our Canelo Bivol giveaway in conjunction with Pickup Play. All you have to do is text RBR to 31032 to get started.
Thank you for listening to the RBR Recap. Make sure to follow us on social media at RBR Recap and visit RBRRecap.com for the latest episodes.